My heart raced as I heard the soft knock on the door. It was unexpected. No one ever visited at this hour. Gathering my courage, I approached cautiously. Peering through the peephole, I saw him. James, my ex-husband, stood there, looking weary yet determined. A flood of memories and unresolved emotions surged through me. What could he possibly want after all this time? "Can I come in, Laura?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Reluctantly, I stepped aside. The last time we spoke, it had ended in bitter words and broken promises. Now, here he was, stepping into my new life, uninvited. He glanced around the room, his eyes settling on the stack of papers on the dining table. "So, you've moved on," he said, almost to himself. I didn't respond, unsure of his intentions. His gaze shifted back to me. "I need your help." "Help?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've got to be kidding. After everything, you show up out of the blue asking for help?" James sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's not that simple. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious." "Serious?" I folded my arms, skeptical. "You've got 2 minutes to explain, or you can see yourself out." He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a worn envelope. "This," he said, sliding it across the table toward me. The envelope felt heavy with foreboding as I opened it. Inside were photos, grainy, surveillance-like images of me. "What is this?" My voice wavered. "Someone's been following you," James said. "And it's not just you, it's me too." I felt a chill run down my spine. The photos were recent, some as recent as yesterday. "Why would anyone be following us?" I asked, my throat tightening. James leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I think it's connected to them." "Them?" My heart sank. I knew who he meant. The shadowy figures from his past, the people he had always claimed to have escaped from. At the time, I thought it was just paranoia, but now? "You need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't want any part of this. Whatever you've done, it's not my problem anymore." "Laura, listen," he pleaded. "This isn't just about me. They're targeting you because of me. You're in danger." I stared at him, trying to gauge if this was another one of his manipulations or something far worse. The fear in his eyes, however, seemed genuine. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come to me after all this time?" "Because I thought I could handle it alone," he admitted. "But it's gotten worse. They know things about you, about your life now." The weight of his words pressed down on me. If he was telling the truth, then ignoring him could be dangerous. But trusting him again? That was a risk I wasn't sure I could take. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James sat back, visibly relieved that I hadn't thrown him out yet. "Just hear me out," he said. "I need your help to figure out who's behind this and why they're targeting us." Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Fine, but if I sense for a second that you're lying or hiding something, we're done. Understand?" "Understood," he said, his tone resolute. Over the next hour, James filled me in on what he knew. The they he referred to was a shadowy group tied to a job he had taken years ago. A job that had gone terribly wrong. He had tried to disappear, but they had found him. And now, by association, they had found me. The story sounded too wild to believe, but the photos were real, as was the fear gnawing at me. "What's your plan?" I asked cautiously. "I've been tracking their movements," he said, pulling out a map dotted with red and blue pins. "They're not just watching us, they're waiting for something. I think they want something I have." "And what's that?" James hesitated. "Information. Files I kept from that job. They think I still have them." I narrowed my eyes. "Do you?" He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "Unbelievable," I muttered, standing up. "You dragged me into this mess because you couldn't let go of something you should have destroyed years ago." "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice rising. "Those files are the only leverage I have." Before I could respond, The lights flickered. We both froze. A moment later, there was a loud bang on the door. My blood ran cold. "Are you expecting someone?" James whispered. I shook my head, my pulse quickening. The banging continued, more insistent now. "Get in the back room," I hissed to James. He nodded and slipped away, leaving me to face whoever was at the door. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Delivery," a muffled voice replied. I frowned. It was nearly midnight. Who delivers packages at this hour? "Leave it at the door," I said. Silence. Then, the banging resumed, harder this time. "Open the door, Laura," the voice said, now cold and menacing. Fear paralyzed me for a moment before I moved toward the kitchen, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy skillet. My hands shook as I held it, the banging on the door growing louder. Suddenly, the door burst open, the lock giving way. A tall figure in black stepped inside, his face obscured by a mask. "Where is he?" the intruder demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, clutching the skillet tighter. The intruder took a step closer, his presence suffocating. "Don't play dumb. We know James is here. Tell me where he is, and no one gets hurt." Before I could respond, James appeared from the hallway, holding a crowbar. "Looking for me?" he said, his voice steady but laced with anger. The intruder turned, and for a moment, the two men stared each other down. Then chaos erupted. James swung the crowbar, narrowly missing the intruder, who retaliated with surprising speed. I watched in horror as the two struggled, the sound of their fight echoing through the house. "Laura, get out of here," James shouted. But I couldn't move, rooted to the spot by fear and indecision. The fight was brutal and unrelenting, and just when it seemed James was gaining the upper hand, the intruder pulled out a knife. "No!" I screamed, finally snapping into action. I lunged forward, swinging the skillet with all my strength. It connected with the intruder's head, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. James and I stood there, panting, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. "We need to go," he said, his voice urgent. "Now." "Go where?" I asked, panic rising. "Somewhere safe. They'll send more people when this one doesn't report back." Against my better judgment, I grabbed my coat and followed James into the night. The streets were eerily quiet as we made our way to his car. He drove in silence, his jaw clenched, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "A place I've been using to lay low," he said. "It's not much, but it'll keep us off their radar for a while." When we arrived, the place turned out to be a dilapidated cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was cold, dark, and uninviting, but it was better than being out in the open. "This is your idea of safe?" I asked, shivering as we stepped inside. James ignored the sarcasm, locking the door behind us. "We'll be safe here for now. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move." Exhausted and overwhelmed, I sat on the worn couch, trying to process everything. James handed me a blanket, his expression softening. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," he said quietly. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I replied, though my anger had dulled, replaced by a deep weariness. "I just want to know one thing. Do you have any idea how to end this?" James hesitated, then nodded. "I think I do, but it won't be easy." As I lay there that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was spiraling out of control. Whatever James's plan was, it would have to work. Because if it didn't, I wasn't sure either of us would survive what was coming next.